Pascal Siakam is a free agent. What could his free agency with the Pacers specifically look like? The pros of the re-signing, the cons the Pacers will have to consider, and what we ultimately predict happens. Tyler Smith's going to join us to break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Wednesday and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we are diving into all things Pascal Siakam free agency. Rick Carlisle said it's priority number one for the Pacers this offseason. Tyrese Haliburton said it's a recruiting mission for him. Text calls every day. Pacers traded for him in January. Now they face the challenge of re-signing him to a new contract. What are all the dynamics at play, including the future salary cap, other Pacers players? What is his max? What can other teams offer him? How does it all work together? Should the Pacers be willing to offer the full max? We talk about negotiations, and we ultimately make a prediction for what we think happens. And I threw in a key wrinkle at the very end, which sounds like a jerk tease to make you listen to the whole thing, but I didn't fully put the thought together until the very end. That's worth considering too. Lots of good stuff today. Lots of good insight. Tyler was great. Let's just hop right in talking Pascal Siakam's free agency. Rick Carlisle called it priority number one for the Pacers this summer. Tyrese Haliburton said he's going to be texting him and calling him every day. The Pacers know it's important, and we should cover it as the important event it is. Pascal Siakam is an unrestricted free agent, the part of this trade that was always the subtle discussion back in January. Is he going to re-sign? Everybody thinks he's going to re-sign. Is he really going to re-sign? All the reporting suggests so. But let's talk about all the dynamics of this, because it's a big contract. It's a big commitment. It's a great player, and there's a lot to that. And who better to do it with than the man, the myth, the legend, Tyler Smith, who, one, has to watch my Phillies be the best team in baseball this year. Two, is now on the Caitlin Clark beat also. And three, is going to answer my favorite question with big contracts like this. Tyler, what would you do with $245 million?
What would I do with 245? I would pay off school bills, and then I'd have a couple thousand left probably. Actually, no, surprisingly, I got my school bills paid off. So I would buy a lot for my family. Of course, you got to go that route. I would get Cubs season tickets. I would give some money to Tom Ricketts, so he would have paid Bryce Harper instead of the Phillies to get him years ago. There's so much.
I don't think Ricketts needs your money, but I'm sure the other fans will appreciate your gesture of getting a player at the door. Yeah, I'm not sure what I would do. I would put a lot of it into just some medium yield savings account and then just chill for a while. Okay, he is a free agent, and again, that was the subtlety part of this trade. Is most assumed, my assumption too was, if you're the Pacers, you don't do this trade without a very good feeling. I don't know what percent you personally put in your head, but like probably better than 80% that he's going to re-sign this summer. I don't know. I don't know what their number was for the appetite. Maybe it was even higher than that. And now the funny part is they just made the conference final. So the proof of concept of how this works is there. That also, like, if he signs elsewhere, they could through gritted teeth say, well, it was worth trading 3 firsts because we made the conference finals. It's still better to keep him to me. So to you, is it we'll go through the pros and cons because I actually think these are mediumly long lists. But to you, is it just as easy as whatever he wants, you do it if you're the Pacers, or is there more nuance than that?
I think there's some nuance. I think they're going to try to negotiate and see if it's not this, the absolute max of that figure that we've talked about. But if him and his agent are saying we're pretty dead set on that, we want to be here, but we think we're worth it, I could see them end up giving him that money, and I would completely do it if I'm the Pacers. There's a lot of conversation that goes with that and why I would do it. I actually put in my notes that I would say there's about a 90% chance in my mind that he's back as a Pacer. I do a column every year as far as certain guys and percent chance I give them to come back, and I'm going 90 for Siakam. I just think it makes too much sense. I don't think they'd do that deal if they didn't have that in place. If you remember, Haliburton even called him before the deal and said, hey, do you want to be here? Do you want to be a Pacer? Like that wasn't for a 4-month thing. That was, do you want to be a Pacer before we give up assets to bring you in? So high probability that he's coming back, and we'll see if it's for that absolute max of those 5 years or not.
So wherever the cap lands, it would be 30% of that in the first year. Right now, that would be the number we said, 5 years, 245.34. It's a lot of money. It's exactly what Tyrese Haliburton's next contract is going to be too. He was very good. He is not as good as Tyrese Haliburton, but he's very good. And the argument always in favor of this is he's very good, and you want to keep the best players on your team. And my always thing I say when people talk about the raw number or the sticker shock or whatever being so huge is the absolute best players in the NBA, and to me, Tyrese Haliburton's in this group, but I get why people would disagree, are underpaid, even on max contracts, right? Like, pick whoever you think the best player in the NBA is. Like, Luka's alive, so I'll use him. Luka right now is underpaid. He's probably worth 80, 70, $100 million if there was just like an unlimited, budget per player in the salary cap. And that's why I think good players are worth maxes that aren't considered that tier of player, including Pascal Siakam, who was so great in the playoffs too, which really matters. And I think the Pacers have to make a lot of their decisions based on that. So the reason I bring up his max in year one is that is a starting point to think about when you get to what you talked about is who else could get him, right? If he's going to not sign with the Pacers, and we'll talk about negotiations later, could he actually go somewhere else? What does that look like? Well, if you look at teams with lots of cap space this summer, there are 5 teams with more than about 20 million that they could reasonably get to. Any team could get to a lot if they do unreasonable things. And that is the OKC Thunder, who, even if they did as much as they could probably get to about 35 million, which is which is less than Siakam's max. The Jazz can get to 38. And then 3 teams that can get to max space would be the Orlando Magic, the Detroit Pistons, and the Philadelphia 76ers. So that is important that 3 teams are there because there's a way for Siakam to say to the Pacers, hey, I have a lot of money coming from other teams. Do the Orlando Magic with Banchero and both Fogners and centers, they're big already. Do they need another guy like that? I don't know. Does he want to go play for Nick Nurse again? I don't know. Does anyone want to go sign up to play for the Pistons right now? I don't know. So maybe if the Thunder or Jazz get zany, there's some scariness. But to me, that is a key part of this too and we'll get to the negotiations at the end. Like I said, there's not a lot, like there are other options. It's not unreasonable to me that those would be realistic landing spaces, but it's hard to, like, you either have to squint or like that team has to clear more space for it to become a competitive bidding war in this process, which is why maybe this whole podcast isn't us just saying, yep, day one, full max, done. But I still think that might be where it lands.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And, I saw the report of, I think it was a few weeks ago, Philadelphia may be one of those teams that has that interest, and Siakam would possibly be leaving 62 million or so, if that figure is correct, on the table. Is that something he wants to give up, that guaranteed money, while leaving a place that he just went to and said he's blessed to be there and feels comfortable with? He really does feel like a guy that, he said that from day one, post-game press conference, that he's like, I don't really go anywhere. I go to the game and go home, and I just like to be in an environment, family environment and those kind of things. So maybe he was just saying all the right things at the beginning there, but I really feel like that's who he is. But yeah, as far as whether it's a max or not, it may come down to that as well. If there's some bidding wars and a lot of interest for high dollars, and the Pacers may have no choice but to say, all right, let's just go ahead and get this thing done with the max and be done with it, which could be what ends up happening.
We'll get into the nuances of that specifically, but you're right. That's a good thing to point out. Even if one of those teams wanted him, their max offer to Siakam is 4 years, $181.9 million, which is $63 million less than the Pacers max offer. This is kind of dumb. I did this yesterday when talking about extensions for good players, but like the pros, we have to talk about the pros of keeping him, and that's that he's good. Duh, right? Like, you want to have good players on your team. He clearly proved that he, one, fits in their style. Part of that is that he's good, and part of that is he kind of, like, the Pacers for so long were speed and rim and 3, and that was great. And he just adds in this mixture of different styles that just like makes everything work really well. I really enjoyed the way he played, and like, you keep good players. So that is a boring answer, but the first pro, similar to giving Nembhard a contract extension, is just like, yeah, you don't get the rubric now of the Pacers of like young talent in the future. You just made the conference finals. You want good players on your team, and he is a very good player. And the big pro of that is they can't replace his talent level, right? If they lose him, even if they get their max cap space without him, it would be like 26 million max cap space. And he is worth way more than that. So the pro is you keep him and you don't lose him for a replacement that is so much unquantifiably worse.
Yeah. And that's a big thing with a lot of fans that I saw. Of course, we had a couple games in the playoffs that weren't, max level, as they would say, and they started to get concerned by that. But I think even asking the question, is he worth the max, to me is asking the wrong question, because if you're a small market team that just added this player and now you have that advantage of being able to pay him more than other teams, guys like that don't grow on trees. Guys like that don't come to small market very often. What you've built and this, little taste of winning a couple rounds, like it's just not the right question to ask. Like if the question was like, hey, let's list out all the guys that deserve the max in the NBA, would Siakam be on the list? Maybe not. Maybe he wouldn't be on that list. But when it comes to this Pacers team, the current situation,
Yes,
like it's absolutely a guy that they got to keep. And I even go back to game 2. People will think most about the game 3s and the game 6s in those 2 series, especially. But game 2 in Milwaukee, actually after game 1, who was the guy that calmed everybody down and said, hey, it's 1st to 4, it's one game, and then he goes out and drops 37 in game 2. I don't think Pacers beat the Bucks in that series, whether it's the hospital Bucks or not, if they go down 2-0, and he's the guy that got it done. So, and that's something that Carlisle mentioned too. Like, we didn't just get him here to make playoffs, but to win series, and that's what he helped them do. So that's obviously a huge pro.
Yeah, the Bucks series, like to your point about them winning that series, he was so good at the beginning that they changed the way they were guarding the Pacers, and then that allowed Myles Turner to help carry them home in games 3 and 4. Like, who knows what happens if Siakam's not he was the best player in the playoffs through name your number of games, right? He was that good to start it, and it changed that whole series, and they win because of him. Then they have the Knicks, and he had the one game early in the series. It was his only bad playoff game. I think it was game 2. He shot under 40%, and then OG got hurt, and he was like, okay, I'm just going to score every time I touch the ball now because they have no one left to guard me reasonably. And like that's a thing, is that without a player like OG Anunoby on any team, he is a matchup that teams have to consider. Like, how are we going to guard this guy, right? Against the Celtics, the second best defense in the NBA, he had 24, 28, 22, and 19, and 2 of those were double-doubles. Like, yeah, they got swept that series. Like, he was good. So the pros are so obvious to me. It's just he's so good. They need him. He fits very well. And one more to throw in, a 5-year max would be the exact same length as Tyrese Haliburton's contract, which if you're building out a core for presumably that long, maybe longer, that matters. And the cap is also going to grow, presumably, assuming this TV deal reported numbers are accurate, probably 10% per year for the next 5-6 years. His raises are only 8%, so that gets farther and farther from his max value. Man, do I have any more cap dorkery to go through? No, but anyway, all those reasons are why they should want to keep it.
Did I miss also, you're in a situation now where you've got guys like Nembhard, Nesmith, McConnell, Mathurin, Walker, even a little bit of, Turner's not making a crazy amount. Like, those guys are not making a ton of money currently. So that also allows you to pay the 2 big guys this money and make it work. And there's just, it would just be a huge step back. All this momentum they built to not give him that money. So I feel like, we saw it through the playoffs, very consistent numbers. His 3-point and free throw took a bit of a dip, but everything else was right on par.
Foul shot,
right on par for the regular season, and it was just very, very, very solid, steady player.
I have a take that isn't a Siakam take, but applies to him here, and that's that maintaining your stats into the playoffs is actually impressive because the game is slower and everything is harder to do. So you're actually playing better by having the same stats, and he actually had better stats. So did Andrew Nembhard. Yep. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all carry around different stressors, some big and some small. If we leave them bottled up, it can start to affect us negatively. Therapy is a safe space to get things off your chest, to figure out how to work through whatever is weighing you down. It can be helpful for so many things, like learning positive coping skills, setting boundaries, empowering you to be the best version of yourself. Therapy is not just for those who have experienced major trauma. And if you've been thinking about starting, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So get it off your chest with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Okay, $245 million, Tyler, is a lot of money, and that's why we even can have a cons discussion period. And the other part of this that we haven't said at all yet, which I'm sure some listener has made it this far, and it's like, why haven't they mentioned yet? He turned 30 this year, right? So a 5-year deal would end when he is 35. Does a player like him significantly drop very soon? Because to me, if you get 3, even 2.5 good years on this deal, that's still probably worth it. But if it's only 2 good years or 1.5, then it's like, it's risky. So here's what I'll say first to kind of smooth over people's immediate fears of the age thing. Like Drew Holiday is the example I'm going to use. He signed a contract with the Bucks in 2020, and everybody was like, whoa, that's huge. He's going to age, and it's going to look terrible. That might be a really bad contract by the end. And instead what happened is he was so good for the whole thing that he just signed another one that's even bigger with the Boston Celtics. Like, being 30 is not a death sentence, right? There are lots of guys that we've had that discussion with. Oh, their deal's going to suck by the end, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out to be good. There's only one player in the league, and he might even just have been too injured for it to matter. And that's Beal, who's like climbing to the wrong side of 30 and deteriorating. I can't remember exactly how much. Oh, yeah, he turned 30. He'll turn 31 later this month, right? But he's a guard. With forwards, it's different. He has size. He has acumen. So I think that there are legitimate ways to discuss, will this be an overpay right away and get way worse really fast? But I also think there's a lot of context of like, especially just given what he just was 2 months ago, that guaranteed 1 year is very good, probably 2 or 3, that it's still worth it, even if the last 2 years are just so massively bad. But that's like, how often does that happen without a catastrophic John Wall, Chandler Parsons injury where a contract is just so awful by the end? That's why I get those fears, but I'm not sure that it's the biggest concern the Pacers should have.
Yeah, it's always a risk. You're talking big money, big years. I mean, any sport, you name it, there's risk involved. For a lot of guys, a lot of players in a lot of sports, the back half of it doesn't look quite as good as the front half. But I put that in my notes as well, that I feel really good about the next 3 years of Siakam. So after that, he could still be probably a really good player. I mean, he's been so steady so far. There's no signs that point to like a really quick decline overnight. And again, where the Pacers are in this moment, they want to compete next year. They got a taste of it. They want to go out and prove it. They want to make sure it's not a fluke season. And so to do that, you're going to need a guy like that the next couple years. So thing too is, I can't tell you how many like conversations I've had over the years, fans upset about, well, the Pacers can't get free agents. And a big reason why is not just small market and they live in Indiana. A big reason why is they've rarely been the highest bidder for any free agent. I mean, show athletes the money. And if you pay more than anyone else, there's a 90-some% chance that athlete is going to go where the most money is. They've not really been in that position. Now you have a guy right in your lap to be the highest bidder, to keep his services. That's one of the advantages of trading for him in the first place. So I think they're going to pay him. I think it's worth it. And any of those concerns is kind of like, that's probably a long way down the line. It's a risk that you probably need to take no matter what.
I think the John Walls, the Ben Simmonses, the Chandler Parsonses, I'm probably missing a few, like the truly, oh my gosh, this is awful max contracts were so bad that it scared teams into being smart about this stuff. Because right now, if you just look at the top 30 paid players in the NBA this past season, I think James Harden's probably about fairly paid. TJ McCollum, a little overpaid, I'd say. Ben Simmons is awful, but a major injury is a big factor in that. Tobias Harris is awful, and he's about to make way less next year. Klay Thompson is awful. He's about to make way less next year. Harden's also about to make less. So you could say maybe CJ McCollum and probably Bradley Beal, and we'll see about Cat, although he's still super young, are like bad of the top 30. Like, there's not that many. It's not a thing that happens as much as people talk about. It's just the worst case scenarios are so bad and crippling. And don't get me wrong, that's like, I guess, within the realm of possibility, but are so bad and crippling that it's alarming for teams. And that's why people see these massive numbers for 30-year-olds and freak out. But a lot of the evidence, and a lot of these guys that I guess Zach LaVine should probably be in this group too. But a lot of the guys whose names I'm looking at are over 30 or over 35 in some cases, like Durant, like LeBron. So I don't think being 30 Like 35 is my cutoff when players start to deteriorate unless you're a star. And maybe it'll happen sooner for Siakam, but I have some concern. Obviously, I think the Pacers probably do over paying a 30-year-old that much money, but I don't think that it's a concern of like, this is more likely than not to happen. And that's why I think they'll end up doing it anyway. That's the end of my rant on people who think it might be a massive overpay.
Yeah, and I was even thinking about the lunch we had with the media with before the season started. Chad Buchanan talked about
Yep.
this coming season. We're still going to be all about long term and development. We're not going to have band-aids. We're not going to have short term, moves. And so that's, to me, that's another sign that when they made this deal, the health of the organization, they're in a good spot. But it's like we feel like this is a long term guy. This is not just a rental of any sort. We're not going to give up assets for that. So yeah, as far as the age thing, obviously there's going to be quite a few fans that are nervous about that, understandably so. But at the same time, look at what they're building. He has such a track record compared to a lot of the guys you even mentioned. Like the talent was there for some of those guys, but they didn't have the longevity. I mean, this guy is just a hooper that works hard, and he's mostly been healthy. I think he's got close to 70 games average since 2018. So he's typically on the court. Hopefully he stays healthy. And if he does, I think he's going to be good for quite some time.
Yeah, since he was in the G League. Oh, I can't do math fast enough. 500 games played the last 6 seasons, whatever that math is. Because his rookie year was in the G League partially. Yeah, that's a good point. The other con, I would say, the other thing that would make me, I don't even know if it's have a meeting, but just like if I'm a Pacers executive, I think about this at times. If the Pacers pay Siakam, and they have also now officially paid Haliburton, right? That is a lot of money tied up to 2 guys, and they're worth the money. But does that mean with raises that have already come for Aaron Nesmith and raises that are coming for Nembhard, McConnell, Turner, Toppin this summer? Who else am I missing? That of Mathurin, maybe Jarris, depending on how his career goes. One of the backup bigs. Can they afford all this, right? And the answer is certainly no, because of the new aprons and the tax rules. So something has to get squeezed out. And so if I'm the Pacers, I'm thinking like, man, it'd be really helpful if we could get him for a little less. Or like, man, if we do this, who else can't we keep, right? Who is going to be out because we've made the decisions we made? And the default, if you're a team that just made the conference finals and is trending up with a star who's 24 is, you keep the best players and figure it out. So like Siakam is still in no matter what. But that is at least something you have to think about of like, what does this mean for how we build the rest of our team? And does that make you want to, as we'll get to after we finish this conversation, think about negotiating somewhat hard in a way that makes you land on not quite the max?
Yeah, I think they'll have those conversations. I think they will do a good job as well of kind of laying that out for Siakam himself and say like, hey, we value you this much. We're going to be the highest bidder. We want you here for 5 years, all that stuff. If we come down to this, here's the opportunity that could be keeping this extra player, whatever it is, however they want to map it out. That's something that I think they'll have those conversations. And as I said from the top, if it's one of those things where him and his agent are like, show me the max, then that may be what they end up deciding on. But I do think they'll at least try for that. That may be the thing that makes it not like this quick kind of decision that everyone kind of thinks could happen, like it's just done. If they're kind of looking through some of those things. But for me, it similar to the money, the other con would be development of a guy like Jarris Walker.
Yeah.
If you believe in him, does that stun it at all? But obviously they need a guy to play backup 4, backup 3 at an elite level if they want to get to where they want to go in the second unit. I mean, I'm dreaming of a second unit that has Walker, Mathurin, Nesmith. I mean, you've got some talent there, but yeah, you've got some talent in McConnell. So, yeah, a lot of these contracts are more a year or 2 away, except for Obi. So you've got an opportunity to figure some things out, but that would be the only thing if you're that high on Walker. Maybe that's more of what ends up seeing Obi leave and Walker becomes the immediate backup 4 or whatever the case may be. That's part of your lottery pick is blocked in the starting lineup, but when you're a good team, that's not so much a con when you're a good team.
And you keep all the stuff and say, you know what, this like if it has trade value, great, we'll keep it and figure it out when the time comes. If we have to duck something, if we have to figure it out, we will. One more break here, guys, so we can talk about FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. Finals are coming. I cannot wait. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, if you're a new customer over on FanDuel, you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. But to get that offer, you got to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's $150 that you can bet on player props or spreads or money lines or whatever you're into. FanDuel's got it for you. But again, to get that $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet, you got to visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's negotiate. Let's have some fun. So here's kind of what my default idea has been with this. If he were to, the reason this matters is not just the amount he gets in year 5, which is only the Pacers can offer, is different, but the Pacers can offer 8% raises and other teams can offer 5. And that sounds like it's nothing, but when you start at a big number, what that does is it not only separates the total value, but the per year value is different, because if Pascal Siakam were to sign a 4-year max with another team at $181.9 million per year, that's $45.47 million. If you just multiply that number by 5, it's $227.3. So the Pacers could offer 5 years, $228, and not only be offering him more money than any team could, it's more per year than any team could. And that's already $17 million in savings, and maybe the structures can change. And so we can get into how much the other cap space teams might want him or the Pacers' other finances. But to me, that alone at least gives the Pacers the grace to walk in the door and try to negotiate and say, we can still give you the most, even per year. It can start at the max. You could say it's the max, but we could chop off this or that and change it up. And then maybe it hurts less in the 5th year. Maybe it doesn't matter. It doesn't hurt at all. Or maybe it, has some different guarantee structures like that. To me, I still think this ends. I'll predict this in a second with a full max, but that's why the door is open to me that it ends up less than that, because they can do that creatively, and the raises on a giant number end up creating a giant difference that you can negotiate with.
Yeah, that's good to know. It's good for fans to know and know that that's even a possibility. You wonder too about certain guys, as you said, there's a way that it can still be called the max.
We hear this every year from agents speak.
Yeah. For a player to be like, I'm a max player, so give me my max money. And for some guys, I don't even, paint Siakam in that light of like, I demand this or whatever, but it's still an athlete that is, all NBA player and all-star and all that, and just took them to the conference finals and all that stuff. And, so just having that title may be important to certain guys, but I could also, what a great story would be if it's like, hey, we negotiated, I want to be here, but allow some flexibility for the future, and maybe front load the contract, so it's less of a hit later on. There's some options in there, but yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Because it's already less of a percent of a cap every year, like even flat $42.3 billion a year, which is, I can't do math fast enough, 5 for 215 or something, would be like incredible to me, just in terms of like how much that descends in terms of percent of the cap every year. So what negotiations actually looks like, I still think that probably the first year starts at 42.3 or whatever it ends up being, because again, whatever the cap lands at changes these numbers. But could it be that, like I said, it's 5 for 230, and then the second year is lower, and or could it be the full max, but only 230 mil is guaranteed, which sounds stupid, but like if that's a 1/3 guaranteed final season, cool. Maybe that helps you feel better about it if you're the Pacers and you're in a bind because he aged poorly or something, or maybe the cap environment changed and you can do something different with that. Or, there's all sorts of ways that could make it unique. So I just think as long as the Pacers are offering the most, maybe they'll try. But if I'm Siakam, I all he needs is one team to offer the 4-year max. He's like, no, do it. I want it all. And the Pacers should acquiesce if that happens. So that's why I ran through the teams earlier. Again, the teams that it's within reason to me, two of these teams would require some creativity and moves to get to max space, or at least Siakam's max space. OKC, Utah need to be creative, and then Orlando, Philly, and Detroit do not need to be creative. It's very easy for them to do it. So I'll make a prediction in just a second, but there's enough factors to negotiate. I'm saying the same thing twice, but I still think that it's pretty easy. Oh, and the other final factor that I mentioned a few times on this podcast is new CBA rule. Teams can negotiate with their own guys the day after the finals. Does that help? Does it matter? Do we just find out officially sooner? Because never, ever has a team done it early before. I mean, we've only seen a tampering punishment every year now for the last 3 years. So maybe we'll find out sooner. Maybe it'll be quick and painless.
Yeah, hopefully we get some news on that. And, I just love how, even the exit interviews, Haliburton say, I'm going to text him, call him every single day.
Every day.
That's why for any fan that's out there and thinks, well, they're probably thinking about it, really considering they're only considering how they're going to approach the situation, as we've talked about, and if they can, save a few $1,000,000 here and there in the process. But Carlisle said it, Haliburton said it, number one priority. Everything else in the offseason will hinge off of that. And some other things could start to make more sense too, whether they try to extend a couple of their guards they have, and they'll have a better idea of how to do that based on the Siakam stuff, which will ideally happen sooner than later. Some news right after the finals are over, and then we can get a better outlook of their next step from there.
I do wonder if it'll matter to teams, players, agents, whatever, to get that clarity into the public before the draft. I don't know. In some cases, it could not help you, right? Depending on what a team does. But in some cases, I wonder how that could influence strategy or things like that. I just think that's such a fascinating rule change that might just amount to nothing. Like maybe none of this stuff gets out until June 30th anyway, because there is teams with cap space, but I'll be curious by that. All right, prediction time. I already alluded to mine, so I'll just go first. I think there's a chance that they tried to negotiate, but I think this lands on a 5-year full max. That's where I think this lands. And I think if you're the Pacers, you do it. It is impossible to calculate, but so much better than not having Pascal Siakam, to have him on a contract you might view as too big. And so I think the final result here, despite the many factors that suggest maybe it could be a little lower, will end at 5 for 240, whatever that max ends up being.
Yeah, I'll give the boring answer because, if we were on Showdown of Around the Horn,
you'd have to do the other side.
I would have to say something different. So 5 and 242. No, I think it's. Yeah. I would agree. I think that's where it's going to end up. And as we've said, I think they're going to try. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some other structuring to it, where the Pacers are still the highest offer. They get their guy, and it looks even slightly better for future years. But yeah, I think that's the direction this is heading. And I think even from day one, when we heard of the trade, I think that's the direction that was going to head.
All right, now that we've covered all the bases, let me lob a grenade to end this, Tyler. If you are Pascal Siakam, or you know what, you've observed him for a season, do you think he could still be this good as he is right this second, 2 years from now? I'll explain why in a second. Just can you answer that first?
2 years from now, yes, I do. One reason is I think he has a chance, especially this coming season, to be even better than this year with the full off season. With he played exactly half a year, played 41 games. There were injuries. There's all sorts of stuff. Not much practice at the beginning. Have a full off season and learn each other. I think he could be even better next year than this year. So I'll go ahead and say yes for year 2. Probably not year 3, but I'll say yes for year 2.
So I agree with that. The reason I think that matters is Pascal Siakam currently has 8 years of service. In 2 years, he'll have 10 years of service, which matters because then your max becomes 35% of the cap. Is there a reality where Pascal Siakam wants a 2-year deal? And I don't know, because he's 30 already. If he was 28, I would actually maybe have thrown this in this discussion a lot earlier. At 30 right now, he'll be 32, entering his age 33 season. Maybe don't want to risk that a lot. Even guys like Anthony Davis have taken the money as soon as they can, right? Isaiah Thomas was a lesson for a lot of guys. But I wonder if that is a thought that enters this discussion, even though I don't predict it is. I just wanted to end with and bury a thought that is clever. End rant.
Yeah, that is interesting. I don't think he would do that. And I'm actually not even fully. Sometimes the contracts of each sport, could he do it? Could he do the 5 with an opt out after 2, or is that not a thing in the NBA? I can't even remember.
NBA thing.
Yeah, I didn't think it was, because that and the deferring money and stuff like that.
If he signs with the Cubs this summer, maybe
yeah,
that.
there you go.
Reality.
Or the deferral of I knew that. Yeah, the Dodger deferral will never happen in the NBA. He's going to take $5 million and defer 260 or something.
What a
But
farce.
I don't think he'll do that. I think it'll be the full 5. I think he wants to have a place he can call home. But I don't think the Pacers would even be upset if he said, "Give me the 2." I mean, that's 2 great years that we have. So
2 would be about 2 for 90, and you can't extend 2-year contracts, which is why they're scary. 3-year deals you can in the 3rd year, so maybe they do 3. I don't know. There's a lot, like 2. What about 2 and a player option? Like I should have maybe given this more thought now that I talk about it. I still think 5 is the most likely, but I wanted to throw that in as like I'm not pushing this off the table as something that's going to cross my mind, but all the reporting suggests and intuition suggests it's going to be 5 for a lot of money. Tyler, this was great. Thank you for the time. Everybody, I hope I didn't just spoil your lunch with that ending. Where can people find you, your work covering? Okay, hang on. The Pacers, the Fever, the Hoosiers, and the Cubs. Did I miss any?
Those are the big 4.
Yes. Okay. Welcome, Tyler, to the Fever Beat, everybody. Let's go.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I hope to make it to several games. And, I got a Caitlin Clark column coming out, I think, by the time this pod releases. So, Tyler Smith _ISL on Twitter is the main spot. I linked to everything there. So join me in that journey.
Not a lot to say about Caitlin right now.
No.
Hopefully it's just I'm not going to do it. This is a Pacers show. Thank you, everybody, for listening. The next 2 shows this week in some order will be looking ahead at the shooting guard market this summer and probably a player season recap. If not, I will look at Obi Toppin's free agency by myself. I think that is also, like Siakam's, a very endlessly fascinating part of the summer. Give Tyler a follow. Keep up with his coverage of all those teams during the season, including me reading all of his Hoosier stories, because I need to keep up with IU basketball in the many ways that I can. Back tomorrow, talking more Pacers. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful day.